Hey y'all, it's the Stick Figure Historian, and we are back with another episode of the American series. Well, I say we, but it's just me, so whatever. Today, we'll be continuing where I left off with the cliffhanger 2 weeks ago, where Houston and his Texan army just arrived on the scene of Santa Anna's destruction of Harrisburg. They stood staring in shock at the smoking ruins. Where were their leaders? Escaped? Killed? Captured? The answer was not long in coming. A group of their scouts came across a Mexican courier and brought him into the camp. The man told them all that had happened concerning Burnett and the other officials, and of their narrow escape to Galveston Island. He also told them about Santa Anna's miscalculation and intention to bar the Texans' way at Lynchburg. Here, perhaps, was the one chance that the Texans had to catch Santa Anna off guard. Houston saw this, and he knew that the time to strike was now or never. He made a rousing speech to his men, reminding them of the atrocities committed by the Mexicans over this campaign, and calling them to go to battle. "Remember the Alamo," he cried. "Remember Goliad." He hardly needed to do so, for the memories were already quite fresh and painful in the minds of his listeners. The soldiers readily adopted these two phrases as their war cry. And that is largely why the Texan Revolution is always so strongly associated with "Remember the Alamo." It's not like that was the only thing that ever happened in the war, but it was one of the biggest turning points. But because of Houston's speech and its use in the Texans' war cry, to this day, it's still everywhere. Like everywhere you hear anything about Texas history. And I mean, it's not like once you hear it, you're gonna forget it or anything. It's just that, okay, not sure what that's about. But I think you get my point. Remember the Alamo isn't just about the Alamo. It's a slogan that captures the idea of the Texan Revolution in general. The troops were quickly organized to march again. Houston paused, however, when he viewed the small regiment of Tejanos that stood in array amongst them. And remember, Tejanos are Mexicans that live in Texas. And actually, the technical term for the American Texans is Texians, but it's easier for me to say Texans, so I decided not to be technical. Just a note there. It would be all too easy for the Tejanos to be mistaken for Santa Anna's troops, Houston thought, and he was worried that they would be killed in the confusion. For their safety, he ordered them to lag behind and help the sick men that couldn't march as fast as everyone else. But the Tejanos knew this was just a lame excuse to keep them back from the fighting. "No," they cried. "We will fight too. We are not afraid." At last, Houston had to agree to their wishes, on one condition. They must wear a small piece of white cardboard in their hats, so that their friends could tell them apart from the Mexican troops. Together they marched away to cross the San Jacinto River at a ford called Lynch's Ferry. This took them to a perfect place for them to camp. Here they had the friendly cover of a strip of woodland, with the Buffalo Bayou River at their back. Besides this, many of the men knew the surrounding country like the back of their hand. A handy fact when dealing with an area laden with treacherous marshes. And for once, the Texans had both the better ground and the greater numbers. Houston had about 800 to match Santa Anna's 700. Santa Anna arrived a few hours later. He must have been rather ill-tempered to find that his trap had been so quickly foiled. But so matters stood, and he would destroy the Texans whether by guile or no. He pitched his camp not far off to the southeast, tucked in a little peninsula of San Jacinto Bay. It was a very foolish place for him to have chosen to camp, for the lay of the land there would make it very difficult for his men to retreat. I have their camp circled in red on this map here. But actually, it's kind of difficult to understand their position on this one. Here, this is a bit better. Okay, so you can see on the right, the Mexicans are hemmed in by the San Jacinto River. And then behind them, they've got a lake and a huge marsh. That only leaves the left open for a getaway, but if you notice, they're covered on that side by the Texan cavalry. Plus, the bulk of the Texan army are naturally going to be watching that side for escape because, well, it's pretty much the only option, so yeah. Not smart, buddy. Juan Almonte and the other Mexican officers tried to persuade Santa Anna to choose a different site, but the general refused. It was a rather strange act for a man so used to the art and fortunes of war. It was mid-morning of the 20th of April when these two armies met, and it was not long before the fighting began. The Texans took the offensive. The cavalry division broke free from the woodland, bearing down upon a squadron of Mexican dragoons. The dragoons scattered, leaving a stand of Mexican artillery free to attack. The cannoneers scrambled to pull back their guns before the Texans could get control of them. It was a close call, but the Mexican cavalry soon swept in to their rescue, charging at the daring Texans to drive them off. The Texans quickly wheeled their horses about and made back for camp. But Thomas Rusk, that understanding Secretary of War, had got down from his horse to reload his rifle, because in those days it was very difficult to load them while riding. In the wild rush, he had been left behind, all alone. Mirabeau Lamar, one of the volunteer men, happened to look back over his shoulder at this moment. In that glance he spotted Rusk, standing there alone beside his horse. He saw the Mexican cavalry galloping towards him, their sabers glinting in the sun. And Lamar could go no further. He pulled his horse's head around and went back towards the danger. Back to rescue Rusk. He held off the enemy with his own gun while Rusk got in the saddle, and together they headed back to safety. The charging of the Mexicans and the spectacle of Lamar's bravery stirred the hearts of the Texan infantry watching behind the trees, so that at last they could stay idle no longer. Though Houston called again and again after them to hold their line, they would not heed, but burst through the forest and out into the plain. This fresh attack greatly surprised the Mexican cavalry, who could not meet with such fury. There was little fighting before it was the Mexicans' turn to run back to their camp. Splendid fighting it was, for all that, for Lamar performed yet another act of brotherly courage, rescuing a Texan cavalryman who had fallen off his horse. Even the Mexican officers remarked with admiration afterward on the bravery of Mirabeau Lamar. Houston was very ill-pleased when his men returned, all flushed with their success. He scolded them quite sharply, for now that Santa Anna had seen them, he could better judge the strength of their army, which thing Houston had been trying to hide from the Mexican general. But what was done, and his men cared little for all that. They would fight no matter what the odds. This determination would soon be put to the test, for the real battle had not yet truly begun. During the night, Martin Prefecto de Cause arrived with reinforcements for his brother-in-law, so that now the Mexicans once again outnumbered the Texan rebels. This time by a margin of 500.